It was supposed to be a pleasant evening. I just wanted to please my mother, take her to dinner at an elegant restaurant that she always dreamed of visiting. Everything was perfect, the place had a sophisticated atmosphere, and her smile when we entered made me forget for a moment all the stress of work and the little irritations of everyday life. We sat at the table, placed our orders, and I allowed myself to relax for the first time in weeks. But then, everything changed. As my mother commented on the impressive chandelier hanging in the center of the room, my eyes wandered around the restaurant without much purpose, until they came across a scene that made my heart stop. In the opposite corner of the room, at a more reserved table, was her. My wife. The woman I swore I knew better than anyone. The shock hit me like a punch in the gut, but the real blow came a second later, when I saw who was with her. He was an old acquaintance, someone I considered a friend. We had shared so many moments together, and although our friendship had cooled in recent years, I never imagined that he would betray my trust in such a despicable way. They were holding hands, smiling at each other, and for a moment, it seemed like the entire world had disappeared around them. As if they were the only ones there, as if nothing else mattered. With every second that passed, I could feel my blood boiling, mixed with a growing pain that ripped through my chest. My mother, perhaps noticing the sudden silence, followed my gaze and saw them too. It was she who broke the silence with a question that burned even more inside me, "Isn't that your wife?" The confirmation she needed came when I couldn't take my eyes off them. Everything around me became blurry, and my vision was only fixed on the grotesque scene that was unfolding in front of my eyes, like a nightmare from which I could not wake up. "Yes, it is," I finally replied, with a coldness I didn't know I was capable of feeling. "And I'm going to divorce her when I get home." Those words came out of my mouth almost as if they hadn't been mine. It was a decision that had been made in an instant, but that I knew would echo for a long time. There was no going back. And yet, as I watched the two of them together, laughing and whispering like they were teenagers in love, I felt a wave of questions invade my mind. Since when? How did this start? Why didn't I notice anything? Maybe I was blinded by a love that had long since ended, but that I refused to accept. On an almost unconscious impulse, I picked up my cell phone. I wanted to capture that image, concrete evidence that I could use later, in court, to quickly wrap things up. But my hand shook. I didn't know if it was anger or despair, but I couldn't do anything but continue looking, in disbelief, not knowing how to act, what to say, or how to react. I felt like I was on the edge of an abyss, and every second that passed pushed me a little further towards the precipice. As they laughed and toasted, I felt each laugh pierce my chest like a knife. Everything I had believed up until that moment, all the promises, the nights we spent together, the little things she did that made me feel special, it all seemed like a monstrous lie. I felt a mixture of humiliation, anger, and a deep sense of betrayal that threatened to suffocate me. I tried to remember all the nights she kissed me and said, "I love you," before bed, and now those words seemed empty, hollow, as if they had never been true. I'll get this over with, I thought. But at the same time, I realized that this was just the beginning. It wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the end of a life that I had built, brick by brick, alongside a woman I thought I knew. I was about to go to war, and the battle would not just be against her, but against everything I believed to be true up until that moment. But what he didn't yet know was that this betrayal would only be the tip of the iceberg. The night that began with a simple dinner with my mother would end up revealing a much deeper and cruel plot. And as I watched, paralyzed, as they exchanged affectionate glances and complicit smiles, a dark thought dominated me: how far does this lie go? What would I discover next? And what else was hidden behind those innocent smiles? I thought I knew what cheating was, but little did I know that this was just the first piece of a puzzle I was about to unravel. Welcome to the channel. Here, we want to make it clear, betrayal is never justified. The stories you will hear are fictional, but they reflect a harsh reality: how betrayal can devastate lives, destroy families, and leave deep scars. Our mission is to show that the path of lies and infidelity only leads to pain and regret. Get ready to dive into an intense narrative full of twists and turns, where secrets will be revealed and decisions will have irreversible consequences. Sit back, relax and be ready to hear a shocking and unforgettable story. Good story. On a clear spring night, the movement of cars through the streets of Boston seemed like synchronized choreography, while the city lights twinkled like artificial stars on the horizon. In that urban setting, Ryan tried to hide his tiredness and the accumulated weight of the last few months. Dinner with his mother would be a small break in the midst of the chaos he was experiencing. Ryan, a 36-year-old man, had everything many would consider ideal: a promising career as a civil engineer, a beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood, and, as far as he knew, a solid marriage of nearly 8 years to Emily, his wife. Emily was always a captivating woman, with a smile that lit up any room and an energy that enchanted everyone around her. Since they met at a mutual friend's party, the chemistry between the two had been immediate. Ryan always said that her smile was the first thing that won him over, and from that moment on, they seemed inseparable. They shared dreams, tastes and even small rituals that kept the relationship alive, like the way they shared the routine of preparing breakfast together every day. But recently, Ryan had noticed that Emily seemed different. It wasn't something he could easily explain, just a subtle change, but it bothered him in an inexplicable way. Maybe it was tiredness from the projects he was working on, or maybe he was just imagining things. Emily, in turn, was a marketing professional, working for a renowned agency. He had a natural talent for dealing with people and convincing clients, and always stood out at any social event he attended. Elegant and articulate, she knew how to captivate an entire room with just a few words. But lately, there was something she couldn't express even to herself. The routine that had once felt safe and comfortable now felt suffocating, as if she were trapped by something she couldn't identify. Emily found herself constantly lost in thought, but she did her best to hide it from Ryan. They had built a comfortable life together, a house that looked like it was plucked from a design catalog, where every detail had been carefully chosen by Emily. Their home was a refuge from the outside world, and Emily took pride in every well-decorated corner. It was where they hosted friends for dinner, celebrated birthdays and where they built the memories that defined their first years of marriage. Ryan loved the feeling of coming home and finding Emily reading a book in the armchair by the window, or preparing a simple but lovingly prepared dinner. It was these moments that he treasured most. However, as time passed, Emily's little attentions began to dwindle. If before she made a point of preparing the meals that Ryan loved, now she seemed busier and more distant, always citing commitments or work meetings that came up at the last minute. He tried not to bother, but he couldn't help the discomfort he felt seeing Emily spending so much time on her cell phone, exchanging quick messages and smiling alone, as if she were living in a world he had no access to. On the other hand, Ryan was more swamped with work than ever. The company he worked for had won a large contract to build a housing complex, and he took on the responsibility of coordinating the entire team. It was a project that could further consolidate his career, and he was determined to make everything work. However, the price for so much commitment was high. Evenings were spent reviewing blueprints and solving last-minute problems, and Ryan knew this was taking away from the time he was supposed to spend with Emily. He planned to make it up to her as soon as everything settled down, perhaps with a surprise trip to somewhere paradise. But until then, he could only ask for patience and understanding. There was also a third element in their lives, someone who wasn't always there but whose impact was undeniable: David. A friend of Ryan's since college, David was the type of person who made friends easily and always seemed to be in the spotlight. He and Ryan had started their careers together, and for a time, they were practically inseparable. David, however, took a different path, heading into the financial sector, where he had quickly prospered. They maintained sporadic contact, exchanged messages and arranged occasional meetings to drink and remember old times. David had always been that friend that Ryan could call at any time, and even though they were further apart, he still considered David one of the most important people in his life. However, something had changed recently. Ryan noticed that when he mentioned David to Emily, she reacted strangely, as if she were uncomfortable. He decided not to give it much importance. After all, he thought maybe it was just life running in different directions. Ryan had also noticed that David was less available, and when they met, there was an air of discomfort, as if an invisible elephant was in the room. But Ryan attributed this to the fast pace of work and the fact that everyone was busy with their own lives. Emily and David, on the other hand, had bumped into each other a few times at social and professional events. She was always enchanted by David's uninhibited manner, the confidence with which he spoke, and how he seemed capable of making anyone feel special. They exchanged messages from time to time, but Emily always kept these interactions within the limits of cordiality. At least, that's what she told herself. There was a tension there that she couldn't deny, but didn't want to admit. She wouldn't be able to explain to Ryan, or even to herself, why something as simple and harmless as friendly conversation sometimes seemed to carry unexpected weight. For Ryan, that night at the restaurant was a chance to breathe and perhaps begin to correct what he perceived was failing in his marriage. That was why he had insisted on taking his mother to dinner, a way to reconnect, to show Emily that, despite everything, family life was still important to him. And he secretly hoped that Emily would notice this and maybe start to realize that he was trying. Little did he know that that night, which he had planned so much as a break from the chaos, would become the beginning of a storm. While his mother talked animatedly about trivial things, Ryan tried to shake off the feeling that something was about to fall apart. He couldn't explain it, but there was a constant chill in his stomach, a feeling he couldn't ignore, no matter how hard he tried. Maybe it was just accumulated tiredness, or maybe it was something much deeper, a silent intuition that the life he knew was about to change irreversibly. The weeks following dinner with Ryan's mother passed in a heavy fog. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, a silent anxiety that kept him awake in the early hours of the morning. Emily continued with her routines, her commitments became more and more frequent and her absences were justified by work meetings that went on longer than expected. Ryan tried to ignore it, focusing on company projects, but the more distracted he became, the more the feeling that he was being left behind intensified. He knew they needed to talk, but he didn't know how to start. Emily seemed always busy, always distracted, as if she had built an invisible wall between them. It was then that he received a message from David. It was a casual invitation to have a beer after work. They hadn't seen each other in a while, and Ryan decided it would be a good idea to try and reconnect. That could serve as a break to clear up the doubts that had been occupying his mind. When they arrived at the bar, the atmosphere was lively, full of people laughing and talking loudly, but there was an inexplicable tension in their conversation. David was there, present, but he seemed distant, as if he was more concerned with avoiding certain topics than actually opening up to casual conversation. They talked about work, about old college friends, but every time Ryan mentioned Emily, David looked away, took a long drink of beer, and quickly changed the subject. Ryan noticed, but decided not to pursue it. Maybe it was just a mistaken impression, he thought. Back home that night, Ryan found Emily sitting on the couch, scrolling through her cell phone. She didn't hear him enter, so immersed was she in the glowing screen. Upon noticing his presence, he quickly blocked the screen and smiled, but it was a hurried, artificial smile. He felt a pang in his chest. Something was wrong, and in that moment, he was sure he wasn't imagining things. As he lay down next to her, he tried to talk about the day, about the weeks that followed, but Emily's answers were short, evasive, as if she didn't want to prolong the conversation. Ryan knew there was something hidden behind that barrier, but he didn't know how to get through it. It was a message the next day that started to put the pieces into place. While at work, Ryan's cell phone vibrated with a notification from a friend who worked near Emily's office. It was an innocent-looking photo of Emily entering a cafe, followed by a brief text, "I think I saw your wife here, she's with someone." Ryan, without paying much attention, opened the image. The cafe was busy, and Emily was in full view, laughing, leaning towards another person who wasn't fully visible in the photo. He tried to enlarge the image to see who it was, but the resolution didn't help. Still, the slight familiarity in that person's posture made him feel a chill run down his spine. That night, Emily arrived late. When Ryan asked, she explained that she had gotten stuck in a meeting. His voice was controlled, but there was something forced, a note he couldn't ignore. He watched her, trying to find something in her eyes, but all he found was a look that seemed distant, almost impassive. He wanted to believe her, wanted to push those thoughts away, but a part of him had already started to prepare for the worst. The following days were filled with increasing tension. Ryan began to notice patterns he hadn't noticed before: Emily leaving, always claiming meetings that came out of nowhere, the phone calls she answered in a low, discreet tone, and the messages she received late at night, always accompanied by a smile that she tried to hide. He felt like a stranger in his own home, someone observing someone else's life and trying to find his place in it. One day, Ryan decided he could no longer live in uncertainty. He took an afternoon off work and decided to go to Emily's office, telling himself it would just be a surprise, a gesture to break the routine. But as he drove, his heart beat faster, as if he knew something was about to happen. He parked the car and, as he crossed the street to the agency building, he saw Emily coming out the front door. She was not alone. David was next to her, and the way he looked at her as they walked together was enough for Ryan to understand. There were no hugs, there were no kisses, but there was something in the way their eyes met, as if they shared a secret that the world couldn't know. Ryan stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, unable to move, as he watched the two slowly walk away. He couldn't believe he was seeing this. Not David, not his friend for years, someone he trusted and had so many memories with. He followed them for a few blocks, not sure what he expected to find. They entered an inconspicuous restaurant, and he stopped outside, unable to go any further. The shock was turning into a bitter mixture of anger and sadness. He could see the two of them sitting at a table by the window, laughing and talking in a way he and Emily hadn't done in a long time. Ryan approached, stopped by the glass and stood there, watching. His fists clenched at his sides, and he felt tears threatening to escape, but he held himself back. The feeling of betrayal was like a knife stuck deep in his chest. He didn't know how it had happened, how he had gotten there, but everything was clear now. Emily wasn't just distancing herself from him, she was cheating on him, and with someone he could never imagine. Ryan turned away from the window, head spinning, and began walking aimlessly down the street. He knew he needed to confront them, but not here, not like this. That night, when Emily came home, Ryan didn't say anything. He watched her as if she were a stranger, someone he no longer knew, and for the first time in a long time, she couldn't keep her gaze on him. She looked away, mumbled, "I'm tired," and went up to her room. Ryan stood in the room, staring into space as his mind swirled for answers. He knew he needed to find out more, and he knew that confrontation was inevitable, but there was something he still wasn't sure about. What else was hidden in that betrayal? The day has finally arrived. Ryan knew he could no longer avoid the confrontation. Ever since he saw Emily and David together, betrayal had consumed his thoughts, but he could no longer live in the pain of having been deceived. I needed answers. For days, he tried to understand what had happened and why things had reached this point. His marriage to Emily, which had once been his source of happiness and security, now seemed like a cruel trap. He'd planned the confrontation the night before, and when Emily left in the morning, Ryan knew it would be the last time he pretended not to know the truth. Emily arrived home late that night, as usual. Ryan was sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in his hand and a distant look in his eyes. He waited until she was about to go up to her room before speaking, his voice cutting through the silence like a sharp blade. "We need to talk," he said, without looking directly at her. Emily stopped, surprised by the firmness in his tone. There was something about the way he spoke, the way he stood still, that made her realize something was wrong. Slowly, she walked back to the kitchen and sat down on the chair across from him, as if preparing for a trial. "What happened, Ryan?" She tried to sound casual, but the tension in her voice was evident. He was silent for a moment, letting the weight of the situation hang in the air before responding. "I know about you and David." The shock quickly passed across Emily's face, but she recovered quickly. "What are you talking about?" Her voice was louder, but there was a hesitation, as if she knew the truth could no longer be avoided. "Me and David? We're just friends." Ryan looked up, locking eyes with hers. "I saw you in the restaurant. I followed you and saw how you looked at each other, how you laughed together. There's no point in lying." He set the wine glass on the table and leaned forward. "Why, Emily? Why with him?" Emily was speechless, desperately searching for a justification, an explanation that could lessen the impact of that revelation. It wasn't planned, Ryan. I felt alone. And David was there." She tried to touch Ryan's hand, but he pushed it away. "Did you feel alone?" Ryan's voice was cold, almost a whisper. "And you decided to betray our marriage with someone I considered one of my best friends?" He paused, feeling the weight of the words sink in even further. "Do you know what this means? It's not just about the two of us, you destroyed any bond of trust one had." Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she forced herself to continue. "I'm sorry, Ryan. I really am. But there's more you don't know." Ryan's anger grew. He was waiting for an explanation, an excuse, anything that made sense to justify what had happened. But the way Emily said those last words sent a chill down her spine. "What else don't I know, Emily? Isn't it enough that you cheated on me?" She took a deep breath, trying to find the courage to say what needed to be said. "David, he's not just someone I had an affair with. There's something else you need to know." "Speak up, Emily," Ryan practically shouted, losing his patience. "I'm tired of feeling like an idiot. Speak up." Emily swallowed hard, her hands shaking as she tried to maintain her composure. "David and we were together before you and I started dating." She paused, waiting for Ryan to process this. "At that time, we were in a relationship, but he had to move abroad because of work. I met you shortly after he left, and we started dating." Ryan blinked, trying to absorb her words. "You never told me anything about this." "Why?" "Because I wanted to forget, Ryan. When David came back, we were already married, and I thought I could handle it, keep things in the past." She took a deep breath before continuing. "But he came back into my life. And it was hard, really hard to ignore how I felt about him." Ryan felt the world spin. "Are you saying you never stopped loving him?" His voice was now almost a whisper, broken by the weight of what he had heard. "All these years. It's not that simple," she murmured. "I love you, Ryan. But when David came back, I realized that I never really got over what we had. And that's when things got complicated. I didn't plan it, I swear. But we ended up reuniting. And it was like all the emotions came back." Ryan stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair in the process. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "So that's it? All these years you were with me, but you still thought about him? And when he came back, you just took him back?" Emily let the tears fall, knowing there was no hiding the truth anymore. "I know I was wrong. But it was more than just a betrayal, Ryan. It's something we never resolved. David and I had a son. Before he left." The words seemed to echo in the air, and Ryan felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "What?" "I was pregnant right before David moved out. We didn't know how to deal with it at the time, and he couldn't stay. So when he left, I lost the baby. I never told anyone, and I tried to follow forward. But when he came back, all of this came flooding back, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I just wanted to forget it, but it seemed impossible." Ryan was silent, feeling a mix of anger, sadness and a deep sense of betrayal. What he had discovered was much more than he had expected. It wasn't just a physical betrayal, there was a whole story he never knew, secrets Emily had kept for years. He tried to find the words, but nothing seemed to make sense. So all this time, was it just theater? You were with me, but your mind, your heart, were always with him. The tears finally escaped, burning his face as he tried to process what the revelation meant. No, Ryan. I really loved you. I still do. But there are parts of my life that I've never really been able to leave behind, and when David came back, I lost myself. Emily sobbed, feeling the weight of her own choices crush her. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I needed you to know. Ryan pulled away, trying to hold back the anger and despair that threatened to explode. I don't know what to do with this, Emily. You kept all of this from me. And now, suddenly, I'm forced to deal with an entire story that I didn't even know existed. He turned around, unable to look at her anymore. I wanted an explanation, but this is too much. Emily got up and tried to approach him, but he stopped her, raising his hand. I need some time. I need to think. Because right now, all I can see is how much you lied to me, how much you deceived me, and this is something I don't know if I can forgive. And so, Ryan left the house, leaving Emily alone, her tears falling silently as she wondered how everything had gotten to this point. Deep down, she knew this moment would come. He knew that the secrets he had kept for so long, the choices he made, had a price. And now, she was paying. Ryan drove for hours, aimlessly, just trying to make some sense of the whirlwind of emotions that dragged him along. Every kilometer covered was a desperate attempt to escape the reality I had just discovered. But no matter how hard he tried to run away, Emily's words echoed incessantly in his mind. He had been betrayed, deceived, and now he was forced to face a past that was never his, but that seemed to dictate his entire present. The car finally stopped at a riverside viewpoint. It was a place I used to go when I needed to think, a kind of silent refuge. He got out of the car and leaned against the railing, looking at the dark, calm water that reflected the moonlight. He felt empty, as if Emily's betrayal had ripped something vital from within him. He didn't know how to go on, how to rebuild any part of his life after all that. Memories of happy times with her now mixed with the unbearable weight of what she had hidden. He didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the fact that she had shared something so deep, so meaningful, with someone else, and that he could never reach that part of her. As he looked at the river, he began to wonder what it really meant to love someone. Had he failed? Had the love he thought was so strong, so safe, never been enough? Ryan wondered if he could have done anything differently, if there were signs he simply ignored. But, more than that, he found himself facing a profound moral dilemma: forgive and try to save what was left of the marriage, or accept that the love he thought he had no longer existed, and move on. Every choice seemed fraught with pain, and there was no easy answer. The next morning, Ryan returned home, exhausted and hopeless, as if he had aged years in a single night. When he entered, the house seemed empty, too silent. Emily was in the kitchen, sitting, holding a cup of cold coffee in her hands. She looked at him, and her eyes revealed a mix of fear and sadness. She knew he had spent the entire night processing everything, and now she was afraid of what he would say. Ryan. She started, but he raised his hand, asking for silence. You don't need to say anything, Emily, he said, his voice hoarse and tired. I thought a lot. About everything. And I still don't know what to do. He sighed deeply. I loved you. I loved you with everything I had. And now, I don't know if I can forgive. Not because of David. But because you lied to me, hid a part of yourself that I never knew existed. I feel like a stranger in my own life. Emily tried to hold back her tears, but failed. I understand, Ryan. And I'm sorry. I have no excuses, I just wanted you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. I was lost, confused, and didn't know how to deal with it. But I never stopped loving you. But what is love then? Ryan snapped, his voice full of pain. How can I believe this now? If you really loved me, you would have trusted me enough to tell me the truth, to let me try to understand. But you chose to lie. And now it feels like our entire lives together it was a lie. Emily was silent, feeling the weight of those words. She desperately wanted to find something she could say to make things right, but there were no more words. All that was left was the void between them, and she knew she might never be able to fill that space again. After a long moment, Ryan pulled away. I need time, he said finally. I don't know how this will end, but I need to figure out what to do for myself. Maybe I can never forgive, maybe I can, but I need to understand if there's anything left to save here. Emily nodded, her eyes filled with tears she could no longer hold back. I'll wait, Ryan. If that's what you need, I'll give you all the time in the world. In the days that followed, Ryan drifted away. He began to avoid the house, only returning to get clothes and spend short periods of time. He felt like he was floating in a reality that wasn't his own, where everything familiar had changed. He tried to occupy his mind with work, but until then, the questions followed him, relentlessly. One afternoon he met with David. He hadn't planned it, but when David called him to talk, he knew he needed answers that Emily couldn't give. They met in a discreet cafe, far from anywhere they could be seen. David looked nervous, uncomfortable, and Ryan did nothing to ease the tension. He wanted to understand how his former friend, someone he trusted, could betray him so blatantly. I know you're mad at me, David began, his eyes avoiding Ryan's. And I deserve it. But I need you to understand. I never wanted this to happen. But it happened, Ryan replied, his voice sharp. And I want to know why. You knew what she meant to me, you knew what we were building. And yet, you did it. David took a deep breath, and then looked directly at Ryan, for the first time in that conversation. I loved Emily before you. And I never stopped loving her. When I came back to town, I thought I could ignore it, move on, but when we met again, it was like all those feelings came back. I know that doesn't justify anything, but it's the truth. So you think your love for her justifies destroying everything I had? Ryan spat out the words, unable to contain his anger. Do you think that's some kind of excuse? David shook his head. No, Ryan. It's not an excuse. I was weak, selfish. I knew she was married, that she was with you. But I wanted her back, and I thought maybe she wanted her back, too. That. Ryan was silent for a moment, trying to process it all. He felt a mixture of disgust and sadness, a growing despair at everything that had been taken from him. And what happens now? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Do you plan to stay together? Continue as if nothing happened? David lowered his head, unable to respond. I don't know, Ryan. I really don't know. All I know is that I screwed up, for you, for her, and even for myself. I'm sorry. Ryan looked at him for a long time, trying to find an answer, some solution to the chaos unfolding around him. But there was no simple answer, no easy path. He just got up, grabbed his things, and before leaving, he left one last message: nothing you say will fix this. You lost my friendship, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at you both the same way. I just hope this was all worth it for you. And with that, Ryan left, leaving David behind, knowing that the choice he would have to make would soon change his life forever. Ryan knew he needed to make a decision, but the truth was there was no path that wouldn't be painful. He spent days reflecting, trying to find some way to start over, to regain control of his life that seemed to have slipped through his fingers. He decided he couldn't move forward without one last conversation with Emily, one that would put an end to all doubts and uncertainties. He needed to hear from her, directly, what came next. On a gray afternoon, Ryan returned home knowing that, one way or another, this would be the end of a cycle. He found Emily in the living room, sitting silently, as if she knew the time had come to face the truth. She looked up, and for the first time in weeks, he saw there a real fear, not just of losing the marriage, but of losing the chance to redeem himself, to right a wrong that seemed irreversible. "We need to wrap this up," Ryan said, with a calm he himself didn't know was coming from. "I thought a lot, Emily. I thought about us, about everything we've been through, and about what you kept from me all these years. And I realized that I can't go on anymore." Tears began to stream down her face, but this time, she didn't try to justify herself. "I understand," he murmured. "I just wish things were different." "Me too," Ryan replied, looking at her with deep sadness. "But the choices you made got us here. And now, I need to choose what's best for me." He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the words he was about to say. "I'll go through with the divorce." Emily closed her eyes, as if she had been struck by a physical blow. She knew she had ruined everything, but hearing those words made it all the more real. Still, she knew it was the right decision. "I accept," she said, her voice shaking. "I accept because I know you deserve someone who will never make you feel what I made you feel." Over the next few days, Ryan began making preparations for the divorce. It was a painful but necessary process, and little by little he began to realize that he was finally freeing himself. The relationship with Emily was officially over, but there was still one last piece of the puzzle he needed to solve: David. David had tried to reach out several times, seeking some kind of redemption, but Ryan ignored him. However, when a request for a meeting reached him through a mutual friend, he decided it was time to end that part of his life as well. They met in a small cafe, where so many stories had begun and ended. David was more haggard than Ryan had ever seen him, as if the last few months had drained him of all the confidence he used to exude. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," David began, his voice low, broken. "I just needed to say I'm sorry. For everything. I was wrong, and I'll carry that with me for the rest of my life." Ryan looked at him for a moment, trying to find some trace of the friend he once knew, but there was nothing left there. All that was left was a repentant man, trying to fix something that could no longer be saved. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, David," Ryan said finally. "But I'm going to leave this behind. I don't want to live with this anger inside me, I don't want it to consume me. I'm going to move on, and I suggest you do the same." David nodded, visibly relieved, but also aware that things would never be the same. "Thank you, Ryan. I don't deserve it, but thank you." And so, Ryan moved on with his life. He moved to a smaller apartment and began to slowly rebuild his routine, finding comfort in little things he hadn't even noticed before. The pain was still there, but it began to give way to a sense of freedom, of a new beginning. He realized that, as devastating as the end of his marriage was, he now had a chance to redefine his life, to find happiness on his own. Emily, on the other hand, found herself alone, facing the consequences of her choices. She did not try to seek refuge in David, as she knew that chapter was also closed. Instead, he began to look inward, trying to understand how he had allowed himself to get so far into something that, from the beginning, was an escape. She sought therapy, trying to deal with her grief not only for her lost marriage, but for the person she had become in the process. She knew she needed time, and that if she was ever going to find peace again, it would have to come from within her. David decided to leave town. It was impossible for him to stay there, surrounded by memories of what he had destroyed. He asked for a transfer at work, and within a few months, he left for a new destination, looking for a new chance to start over far from everything and everyone he had hurt. He might never find redemption, but he knew he had to try. Months later, Ryan found himself walking along the river, in the same place where, months before, everything had fallen apart for him. But this time, there was an unexpected calm in his heart. He realized that despite everything, he had survived. And, more than that, he had found the strength to move forward. Life wasn't perfect, but for the first time in a long time, it seemed full of possibilities. He smiled to himself, knowing that one way or another, he was okay. Ryan, Emily and David's story didn't end with a happy ending for everyone. But she ended with a powerful lesson, that lies and betrayal destroy not just relationships, but people. And that, as difficult as it may be, sometimes the only way to find peace is to confront the truth, accept what was lost, and find the courage to move on. So, what did you think of this story? Tell us your opinion in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more impactful stories like this. Remember, we do not support any type of betrayal here. Betrayal only generates pain, destruction and regret. Until the next story.